Hello, back again on the Top Recap channel. This time I will tell a movie's entitled Tower Block. Let's get straight into the storyline. The film opens by showing a narrative about an apartment called Tower Block, which was built to protect people after the First World War. However, over time, the apartment, which was once inhabited by working-class people, has turned into a slum controlled by dangerous criminals. The film then moves to a young man named Oscar, who is seen running away after being chased by two thugs. He runs to his apartment and asks for help from the residents. However, instead of getting help, when Oscar entered the apartment, no one wanted to help. Everyone was only focused on seeing Oscar being beaten to a pulp by the two thugs. Shortly after that, one of the residents named Becky came and rushed to help. She heard Oscar's screams, which were getting louder. At the same time, Becky ventured out of the room and immediately separated their fight. However, instead of succeeding in stopping the fight, unfortunately, she was beaten by the two thugs until she was unconscious. Long story short, after the incident, a detective named John came to the apartment. He came to investigate the case of the attack committed by the two thugs, because Oscar was found dead. From the investigation, John assumed that the mastermind behind the murder was a drug dealer who lived in the Tower Block. However, when he went into the apartment and asked for information from the residents, no one wanted to give him any information, especially about who was selling drugs in the apartment. 3 months later, Oscar's murder remains unsolved. The government, infuriated by the frequent crimes in the apartment, sent 2 property agents to persuade the residents to move out. However, instead of succeeding, the residents became angry, insulted the 2 property agents, and kicked them out of the apartment. After the property agents left, all the residents resumed their activities, whether it was playing games, smoking drugs, working as sex workers, and so on. The next morning, when all the residents returned to their activities, the electricity and Wi-Fi network suddenly shut down simultaneously. This surprised them, as the apartment had never experienced a blackout before. The film switches back to Becky, who is enjoying a glass of tea with her boyfriend. However, while sipping tea, a sniper shot is suddenly heard, killing her lover on the spot. It is not known where the shots came from, but it is clear that the sniper began slaughtering the residents of the apartment. Becky, who saw her boyfriend die right in front of her eyes, immediately screamed and moved away from the bedroom window to avoid the sniper's reach. The sniper, who had set up from the neighboring building, brutally continued to fire at the apartment dwellers in sight. They were all confused, not knowing the purpose of this shooting. However, the sniper continued to shoot one by one, as if he wanted to eliminate them all. After the attack that killed several residents, the survivors began to gather. They helped each other help the wounded and tried to close all the gaps in the rooms and windows that could be targeted by the mysterious sniper. Soon, a new problem arose. The sniper had locked all the exits and lifts to the lower floors. Even worse, he also broke the telephone network so that residents of the apartment could not contact the police. On the other hand, Becky is seen with a man named Paul. They entered one of the rooms to rescue a teenager named Curtis, who did not know what was going on. After finding him, Becky immediately explained the situation they were facing. There was a brutal sniper who was trying to kill everyone in the apartment.
Thanks for asking. How the fuck are you?
Curtis, someone's shooting into the...
Then they start to get Curtis to work together to get out of the apartment. Curtis, a former burglar, certainly knows his way around a door. Moreover, they only asked him to open a door.
No! If you don't believe me, open the curtain!
Right after explaining this, Curtis initially did not believe and thought that Becky's words were just nonsense. However, when Curtis was about to check outside, suddenly a shot was fired. In that condition, they then began to gather with other residents. They continued to talk about the next plan to get out safely, including discussing the purpose of the sniper, who somehow wants to kill them all. Shortly after, they began working together to repair the lift. They tried to switch on the electricity that had gone out. After the lift had been fiddled with, it finally restarted very smoothly. However, at the same time, a man entered the lift. Unfortunately, the man was immediately killed by a shotgun blast.
Going lock!
It turned out that the sniper had set a trap in the lift, and they didn't know that the weapon would activate if it was forced open. After successfully getting rid of the trap, Becky, Curtis, and Paul then began to descend to the lower floor using the stairs so they could ask for help from the neighbors. However, when they made it downstairs, they were immediately upset because the exit door had been closed by a hard object, which, despite being broken, kicked, lifted, slammed, and pushed, still did not move a bit. Thinking all their efforts were in vain, they returned upstairs and informed the other residents that the exit had been blocked by a hard object.
This isn't just some random attack. All the planning, these pictures. He's trying to tell us something or teach us a lesson.
At that point, one of the residents who had lost hope and spirit suddenly walked towards the window. Instantly, the woman was shot dead by the brutal sniper. Later that night, they were still confused about the sniper's purpose. They began to argue and express their respective opinions. At the same time, Curtis began to guess that most likely the sniper's goal was revenge for Osser's death. Osser might have been a member of his family. At that very moment, Curtis had an idea, turning the two thugs who had killed Osser. There were two men named Flat and Robbie, who were currently hiding with the residents. After that, they began to urge the two thugs to tell the truth about what really happened. Terrified that they would be handed over to the sniper, the two finally confessed that on the night of the attack, they actually just wanted to collect a debt from Osser that had not been paid for a long time. However, because Osser resisted, the two annoyed thugs accidentally beat him to death. It was confirmed that all the deaths that occurred in the apartment were the work of the two thugs. Curtis, who was already angry, without much ado, dragged them towards the window. Both were killed by the sniper's headshot. After handing over the two thugs, they were still confused as to whether the sniper would continue to kill or just let them go. Simultaneously, a mother and child began to file out of the building through the main road that was heavily guarded by the sniper. They hoped that the sniper had had enough after taking revenge for their brother's death.
Daniel then, just in case.
However, as they were leaving the apartment, a bullet suddenly whizzed by and killed them. From there, it can be concluded that the sniper's goal is not to take revenge, but to massacre all residents who live in the tower block apartment. On the other hand, the film then moves to Becky, who looks confused because the sniper is still hunting them. Until finally, Becky gets an idea. She explains that they have to get out of the building by using a hose that can be used, although the plan is very risky. Paul, who didn't want to stand idly by, volunteered to carry out Becky's idea. If he succeeded, then he would immediately send help to the apartment. After all the preparations were complete, they prepared to head to the roof of the building. However, a trap set near the door immediately shot one of them. Long story short, after the trap was removed, Becky, Curtis, and Paul then rushed to the roof of the building. They start preparing a hose so that Paul can get off the building. Meanwhile, the sniper had realized the plan that Paul and his friends were going to carry out. The sniper began to change positions and immediately shot the hose that was used as a rope to go down the apartment. Because of this, Paul, who was on his way down, was immediately killed by falling from the top of the building. Now, only Becky, Curtis, and an old man named Robert remain. That's when they decided to make a crazy plan by burning all the rooms on the floor so that people would realize their existence. Eventually, the firefighters would come to rescue the three of them. The next morning, the plan to burn the entire room was put into action using petrol. At that time, Curtis asked Becky and Robert to go downstairs first, while he would continue burning the remaining rooms in the next room. After finishing burning all the rooms, Curtis rushed downstairs to catch up with his friends. However, when going down the stairs, Curtis suddenly fell because the bolts in the stairs had come loose. As a result, One of his legs was broken and could not be moved. Becky and Robert, who saw that their friend was injured, immediately helped and treated Curtis' injuries. On the other hand, the film moves to two property agents who realize that the apartment near them is on fire. They immediately enter and try to save the people inside the apartment.
No!
However, this coincides with the sniper who decides to come out of hiding to kill Becky, Curtis, and Robert, who are still hiding downstairs. Shortly after, the man entered the apartment with a smoke grenade and began searching for those who were hiding. Becky, who had escaped the sniper's attention, then rushed out of the building to get a nail gun that was in her car. Right after getting the gun, Becky immediately returned and shot at the sniper. There was a fight between them. With good cooperation, the sniper was finally defeated. It was revealed that the figure behind the sniper was none other than Detective John, who had come to their apartment a few days ago. The reason John committed the murder was because he wanted to make everyone who lived in the apartment die without a trace. According to him, they are bad people who deserve to die. However, when John is about to be killed, he fights back against them. But Becky, who had managed to take the nail gun, without much ado, shot the detective. At the end of the film, after successfully killing the sniper, Becky, Curtis, and Robert are finally able to leave the apartment before the flames spread to the lower floors.